The decision that ended Seraphina Vale's future was made without her in the room. She learned that later, because when it happened, she was standing just beyond the doors of the Crowell Council chamber, holding a sealed portfolio she had prepared for Lucian. Trade projections, debt restructuring, a solution no one had asked her for, because no one ever admitted how much they relied on her. Inside, voices murmured. Then a pen touched parchment. The sound was quiet, ordinary, final. Seraphina didn't mean to listen. She meant to step away. But then she heard her own name, spoken not with affection but with dismissal, as if she were a clause already resolved. Lucian's voice followed, calm, measured, detached. The arrangement was simple. Raven's higher gold would erase the Crowell debts. In return, Lucian would marry a soul Raven's higher. Wealthy, untouchable, desirable in the way bloodlines and money always were. Seraphina waited for hesitation, for outrage, for even a token protest. None came. Her name did not appear again, except when someone suggested compensation, a polite severance, as though loyalty, intelligence, and years of unseen labor could be settled like an invoice. Seraphina stepped back before anyone saw her. She did not cry. She did not shake. The shock froze something deep in her chest, hardening into clarity. So this was her worth. She left the estate quietly, the night air sharp against her skin, the capital lights glittering like a world she had helped build but would never be allowed to rule. That was when she collided with him. The man did not stumble. He barely moved. His presence was solid, immovable, as though the city itself had chosen to stand in her path. Dark coat, unadorned insignia, eyes cold enough to make seasoned nobles uneasy. Lady Vale, he said, as if he had been expecting her. Seraphina had never seen him at court, which meant one of two things. He did not matter, or he mattered far more than anyone admitted. I believe, the man continued calmly, that you were just discarded by people who mistook your silence for weakness. She said nothing. He watched her the way strategists watch battlefields, not for emotion, but for advantage. My name is Cale Morgan, he said at last, and I have an offer. She almost laughed. Offers were dangerous things tonight. It is not romantic, he added, and it is not kind, but it is effective. He explained it simply. A marriage, temporary, strategic, one that will return Seraphina to the court, not as a footnote, but as a protected entity no one could casually erase again. What do you gain? She asked. A pause, a flicker of something unreadable. Stability, Cale answered, and a partner capable of surviving what comes next. What Seraphina did not know, what no one standing beneath the chandeliers of power truly understood, was that Cale Morgan was not merely watching the kingdom's elite. He was managing them. And the moment Seraphina accepted his hand, the balance of power shifted. Quietly, irrevocably. Seraphina returned to Crowell Estate just before dusk, when the corridors were quiet and the servants moved softly, as if the house itself were holding its breath. She told herself she was calm. She told herself she had already understood what would happen. Still, the confirmation cut deeper than expectation ever could. Lucian was waiting in the solar, standing by the tall windows that overlooked the river. He had always liked this room, light, open, impressive without being intimate, a room for decisions, not confessions. He turned when she entered, and for a moment his expression flickered with something like regret. Only a moment. Seraphina, he said, as though her name were a courtesy rather than a history. You shouldn't have heard it that way. She set the portfolio on the table between them. The leather was worn from use, the corners softened by her hands. You signed the agreement, she said. Her voice was steady. That was not an accident. Lucian exhaled and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized well. He used it when he was preparing to justify himself. You know the situation, he said. The debts were worse than we anticipated. Ravenshire's offer solves everything. The estate, the council seat, my family's future. And me? Seraphina asked quietly. He hesitated, then forced himself to meet her eyes. You're capable. You'll recover. You always do. The words landed heavier than any insult. capable, resilient, as though endurance were the same as worth. "So that's it," she said. "Years of loyalty, and I'm an inconvenience you expect to adapt." Lucien's jaw tightened. "Don't make this emotional. This isn't about love. It's about survival." Seraphina almost smiled. She had written those words for him once, coached him to say them during a council dispute. Hearing them turned against her felt surreal, like watching someone wear her voice. "You survived because I made you look competent," she said, not unkindly. "Because I stood behind you and fixed what you broke before anyone noticed." "That's not fair," he snapped, then caught himself. Lowered his voice. "You helped. I'm grateful. But gratitude doesn't outweigh 50 million crowns." There it was. The number, clean and sharp, cutting through everything else. Seraphina stepped closer, close enough to see the strain beneath his composure. "You didn't even try to bargain," she said. "Not for me. Not once." Lucien looked away. "His soul brings security, influence, bloodline." "And I brought solutions," Seraphina replied. "But those don't glitter." Silence stretched between them, heavy and final. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed the hour. "At least be honest," she said at last. "Say it plainly." Lucien swallowed. "I chose what was valuable." Seraphina nodded. Something settled inside her then, cold and immovable. She reached up and removed the ring from her finger, the simple band she had worn while drafting his speeches, negotiating his alliances, believing in a future that required her silence. She placed it beside the portfolio. "Then remember this," she said softly. "You didn't lose me because I lacked worth. You lost me because you never understood it." She turned and walked out without looking back, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Behind her, Lucien Crowell remained by the window, staring at the river, already rich, already relieved, and utterly unaware of the price he had just agreed to pay. Seraphina did not plan to accept Cale Morgan's offer. She planned to walk away, to disappear into the narrow streets beyond the river, where names meant less than silence could be bought with anonymity. She made it as far as the outer courtyard before the weight of the evening finally caught up with her. Cale was waiting there, exactly where he had said he would be, not pacing, not watching the doors, simply standing beneath an unlit arch, hands folded behind his back, as though time were something he commanded rather than endured. "You came," he said. "I haven't agreed to anything," Seraphina replied. "I know." That alone unsettled her. They stood a careful distance apart. Up close, he was more imposing than she had first realized. Not because of size or ornament, but because of restraint. No excess movement. No wasted expression. The kind of man who measured rooms the way others measured threats. "You're the Duke no one understands," she said. "The one people whisper about, and then quickly forget." Cale's mouth curved faintly. "They forget on purpose. It's safer that way." "Why me?" she asked. "You could have chosen anyone." "I could have chosen someone easier," he corrected. "I did not need easy." He produced a folded document from his coat and offered it without ceremony. Seraphina did not take it. "I don't want pity," she said. "Good," Cale replied. "I don't offer it." She studied his face, searching for mockery, ambition, desire, anything familiar. There was none, only intent. "This is a marriage in name and function," he continued calmly. 1 year. At the end of it, you retain the title, a generous settlement, and complete independence. During it, you receive protection, access, and something far more valuable than comfort. "Which is," she asked. "Visibility," Cale said. "On your terms." Seraphina's breath caught despite herself. "You were erased tonight," he went on, voice even. "Not because you lacked value, but because you were too valuable to acknowledge without consequence. That mistake will not be repeated if you stand under my name." "And what do you gain?" she pressed. He hesitated, just long enough for honesty to surface. "I satisfy a requirement imposed by the crown, and I gain a partner who will not mistake silence for weakness." The words landed with quiet force. "I don't trust you," Seraphina said. "I would be disappointed if you did," Cale replied. "Trust is earned. This is an alliance." She finally took the document. The terms were stark, precise, almost austere. No sentimental clauses. No hidden traps she could see. It was unsettling how fair it was. "They'll scrutinize you," Cale added. "They'll test you. They'll try to break you to prove tonight was a fluke." "And you?" she asked. "I will let them," he said, "and then I will remember who fails." Seraphina closed the document slowly. In the distance, the estate lights flared as guests arrived for celebrations she no longer belonged to. She thought of Lucien's relieved face, of the number spoken aloud, of how easily loyalty had been priced. Cale extended his hand, not possessive, not demanding, an offer, nothing more. 1 year, he said. You walk away richer, freer, and impossible to ignore. Seraphina looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she placed her own in it. 1 year, she said. The court learned of Seraphina's marriage before dawn. By midday, every corridor of the Capitol Palace hummed with speculation sharpened into judgment. By evening, the whispers had hardened into something colder, anticipation. Seraphina felt it the moment she stepped inside. The marble floors gleamed too brightly, reflecting chandeliers that seemed less decorative than interrogative. Conversations faltered as she passed. Fans paused mid-flick. Eyes followed her with open curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. So this was what it meant to enter power, without permission. Cale walked beside her, unhurried, his presence a steady counterweight. He wore no ceremonial regalia, only dark formal attire marked with a single, understated insignia. It was enough. The space bent subtly around him, nobles instinctively shifting just enough to make room. Not for her. She's really here, someone murmured. Not quietly enough. Crowell's former fiancée, another voice replied. How ambitious. Seraphina kept her head high, her expression composed. She had anticipated this. What unsettled her was how practiced it all felt, as though the court had rehearsed his contempt long before she arrived. They were announced, briefly and without warmth. No applause followed, only polite silence. Cale guided her toward the inner hall, then stopped. They will expect you to retreat, he said quietly, to cling to my shadow. I won't, Seraphina replied. I know. He left her then. Intentionally, she realized. A calculated absence. Alone, she became visible. The first approach came swiftly. Lady Marowen, draped in pale silk and practiced smiles, inclined her head. Your Grace, she said, emphasizing the title just enough to question it. I must say your assent was unexpected. So was yours, Seraphina replied mildly. Yet here we both are. The smile tightened. Others followed. Questions disguised as concern. Compliments edged with condescension. Each one designed to test her footing, to see if she would stumble under scrutiny. You were very close to House Crowell, a baroness observed. Surely this transition must be difficult. Seraphina met her gaze evenly. Only if one confuses familiarity with loyalty. A ripple of interest passed through the nearby cluster. She moved through the hall alone, drawing attention without seeking it. She noted alliances in posture, rivalries in glances, fear in the way certain nobles avoided her entirely. Patterns emerged quickly. The court was not chaotic, it was predatory, and it smelled uncertainty. Lucien appeared near the far columns, Isolde Ravensheir at his side. Isolde wore confidence like armor, her jewels deliberate, her smile sharp. Their eyes met across the room. Isolde's expression flickered, surprise, then calculation. Seraphina did not look away. A servant offered wine. Seraphina accepted, though she did not drink. Her hands were steady. Her pulse was not. By the time Cale returned, the air had shifted. Not friendly, but wary. They underestimated you, he said quietly. They still do, Seraphina replied. Just differently now. Cale inclined his head, something like approval in his eyes. Good. Underestimation creates space. She glanced around the hall, at the nobles who whispered, the ones who watched, the ones who retreated. No allies, no protection beyond a name she barely understood. Yet as she stood there, alone beneath 100 assessing gazes, Seraphina felt something unexpected settle into place. They had erased her once. They would not do so again. And whether this court welcomed her or not, she intended to learn exactly how it worked before it realized how dangerous she could become. The invitation arrived the following morning, sealed in pale blue wax and delivered with exaggerated courtesy. A salon hosted by Lady Fenwick, minor nobility with major aspirations, the sort of gathering designed to look harmless while sharpening its knives beneath silk gloves. Seraphina recognized it for what it was immediately. "They want to measure you," Cale said over breakfast, folding the letter once and setting it aside, publicly. "Then I should attend," Seraphina replied. He studied her for a moment, assessing not her confidence but her readiness. "They will provoke you," he said, subtly. "I know," she said. "That's why I won't provoke them back." The Fenwick residence shimmered with polite excess. Soft music, crystal laughter, conversations arranged carefully enough to appear spontaneous. Seraphina entered alone, as Cale had suggested. A deliberate choice. Let them think her unguarded. The questions began before she reached the refreshments. "How extraordinary," Lady Fenwick said brightly, guiding her toward a cluster of listeners. "A common-born duchess. You must find the transition overwhelming." Seraphina smiled faintly. "I find complexity familiar." A ripple of polite laughter followed. Someone asked about her education, another about her former position in House Crowell. Each inquiry sounded curious, harmless, until the pattern emerged. They were trying to reduce her. And of course, a viscount remarked, the real decisions were handled by Lord Crowell himself. Seraphina inclined her head, often, when he understood them. Silence, brief but telling. The conversation shifted, steered carefully toward economics, trade routes, tariffs, the kind of topic meant to expose pretenders. Lady Fenwick gestured toward a ledger on a nearby table. "We were just discussing the Eastern grain shortage," she said. "Perhaps you've heard of it." "I drafted the contingency proposals," Seraphina replied calmly. A few brows lifted. The Viscount leaned forward. "Then you'll know the tariffs favor domestic producers." "They do," Seraphina agreed. "Assuming domestic output meets demand. It doesn't." She spoke without haste, laying out figures, timelines, consequences. She did not dominate the conversation. She guided it, corrected gently, clarified without condescension. When someone interrupted, she paused, let them finish, then dismantled the argument with quiet precision. The circle around her grew. Someone laughed, not mockingly this time, but with surprise. "Well," Lady Fenwick said thinly, "you've certainly done your homework." Seraphina met her gaze. "I prefer understanding the systems that govern people's lives." Across the room, Lucian watched. She could feel it without looking. When she did, his expression was strained, caught between disbelief and recognition. Isolde murmured something to him, sharp and low. The final test came from an elderly lord with nothing left to lose. "Cleverness is admirable," he said, "but it doesn't make one fit to lead." "No," Seraphina replied, "but it makes one dangerous to underestimate." A few smiles followed, not kind ones, respectful ones. By the time Cale rejoined her, the tone had shifted again. Conversations resumed when they passed, but more cautiously now. "They came prepared," he said quietly. "So did you." Seraphina exhaled, the tension finally loosening its grip. "They weren't testing my intelligence," she said. "They were testing whether I'd apologize for it." Cale's mouth curved slightly. "You didn't." "No," she said. "I made them adjust." As they left the salon, Seraphina understood something vital. The court would never welcome her, but it was beginning to account for her. And in a world built on power, that was the first real victory. Sleep did not come easily that night. Bradford Hall was too quiet after dark. Not the comforting hush of peace, but the disciplined silence of a place built to conceal movement rather than invite it. Seraphina lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the salon in her mind. The looks, the recalculations, the way Cale had watched from a distance, as though measuring outcomes she couldn't yet see. Sometime after midnight, she rose. She told herself she was only walking, learning the house. That curiosity was harmless, but her feet carried her down corridors she hadn't explored, toward the west wing Cale occupied. The door between their wings stood slightly ajar. It hadn't been before. Seraphina hesitated, then pushed it open. The air changed immediately. Cooler, sharper, faintly metallic. Light spilled from a room at the end of the corridor. Steady and white, unlike the warmth of candle or lamp. She moved toward it, every step quiet on polished stone. The room stole her breath. Maps covered the walls, floor to ceiling, working maps marked with pins and thread and handwritten notes. Cabinets lined one side, each drawer labeled with noble house names. A central table overflowed with ledgers, correspondence, seals. This was not a study. It was a command center. She stepped closer to the nearest map. Red pins clustered over certain regions. Blue marked others. Notes detailed debts, alliances, scandals, fractures waiting to be exploited. Her name appeared once, written neatly beside House Crowell. Primary strategist. Seraphina's pulse thundered. You weren't meant to see this yet. She turned. Cale stood in the doorway, fully dressed, expression unreadable. I'm sorry, she said automatically. The door was open. It was, he replied. He closed it behind him. Because I wanted you to find it. Eventually, her gaze swept the room again. You're watching the entire court. I'm documenting it. Cale said, moving to the table. There's a difference. You have files on everyone, she said. Secrets. Leverage. Yes. Why? He met her eyes without flinching. Because armies can be defeated. Wealth can vanish. Information, properly used, endures. The pieces aligned with sickening clarity. The whispers, she said. The fear. You're not irrelevant. No, Cale agreed quietly. I'm necessary. She sank into a chair, legs unsteady. You rule from the shadows. I prevent collapse, he corrected. Quietly, when possible. He opened a drawer and slid a folder across the table. House Crowell. Inside were contracts, drafts, correspondence. Her work highlighted, cataloged. You knew, she whispered, about Lucian. I suspected, Cale said. Men like him always sell what they don't understand. And you married me because of this, she asked. Because I'm useful? His jaw tightened. I married you because I needed someone who could see this room and not mistake it for villainy. Silence stretched. Seraphina looked at the maps again, not with fear now, but comprehension. This was power stripped of illusion. Ugly, necessary, dangerous. You should have told me, she said. I wanted you to choose, Cale replied, knowing everything. She stood slowly, then listened carefully. I won't be a kept secret or a silent asset. He inclined his head. I wouldn't accept you as one. Good, Seraphina said, because if we're doing this, truly doing this, we do it together. A pause. Then Cale extended his hand. Partners, he said. Seraphina took it. In the cold light of that room, surrounded by the kingdom's secrets, she understood the truth at last. She hadn't married safety. She had married power and chosen to wield it. Morning arrived without ceremony. Seraphina stood at the tall window of her chambers, watching the mist lift from the grounds of Bradford Hall. Yesterday, survival had been enough. Keep dignity. Keep footing. Endure. Today, that instinct felt insufficient. Small, even, she dressed deliberately, choosing dark silk unadorned. Not armor. Not softness. Intention. When she entered the West Wing, Cale was already awake, seated at the central table of the intelligence room. Papers lay arranged with military precision. He looked up as she approached, eyes sharp but questioning. You didn't avoid it, he said. No, Seraphina replied. I wanted to see it again. She moved around the room slowly this time, not as an intruder, but as someone assessing terrain. The maps no longer felt overwhelming. They felt readable, threads connected, patterns repeated. The court's cruelty was not random. It was systemic. "You've built this to hold the kingdom together," she said. "But you're doing it alone." Kale's expression tightened. "Alone is simpler." "It's also fragile," she countered. "One misstep, one illness, one knife in the dark, and this collapses." Silence followed. Not defensive. Considered. "You're asking for more than alliance," Kale said finally. "I'm offering more," Seraphina replied. "Survival is reactive. It keeps you breathing, but it doesn't change outcomes. I didn't marry you to endure quietly while you carry this burden." She turned to face him fully. "I choose the throne." Kale studied her, searching for hesitation, fear, ambition unchecked. What he found steadied him. "The court will not forgive this," he said. "Once you step fully into this role, they won't just test you. They'll target you." "I know," Seraphina said. "They already have. The difference is I won't be doing it blindly anymore." She reached for a file at random, opened it, scanned the contents. "You gather information. I interpret behavior. You hold leverage. I understand pressure points. Together, we don't just prevent collapse, we reshape incentives." A pause, then a quiet exhale. Kale rose. "If you stand beside me in this," he said, voice low, "there's no stepping back. No plausible deniability. You become part of every decision that follows." "Good," Seraphina said. "I'm done being erased." He extended his hand again, not as a test this time, but as acknowledgement. She took it. "Then we begin properly," Kale said. "You'll learn how the court breathes. Who panics under scrutiny? Who pretends loyalty? Who can be redeemed? And who cannot?" Seraphina added. A flicker of approval crossed his face. As they stood together amid maps and secrets, Seraphina felt the last remnants of her old life fall away. She was no longer reacting to betrayal or clinging to protection. She was choosing power, not for revenge, not for safety, but for change. And somewhere deep within the court's carefully constructed hierarchy, something shifted. The throne had not yet noticed her, but it would. The invitation was impeccably polite. Too polite. Seraphina recognized Isolde Ravenshear's hand the moment she read it. A formal summons disguised as courtesy, stamped with the seal of the Ladies' Committee for Royal Functions. An evening forum. Open attendance. A discussion on propriety, lineage, and the preservation of noble standards. Public. Performative. Dangerous. "She wants witnesses," Seraphina said, folding the letter carefully. Kale read over her shoulder, expression unreadable. "She wants a spectacle." "Then she'll have one," Seraphina replied. The forum was held in the eastern gallery of the palace, a cavern of marble and glass designed to amplify voices. Nobles filled the tiers, their curiosity sharpened into anticipation. Isolde stood at the center, radiant in gold and jewels, confidence gleaming as brightly as her smile. Seraphina entered alone. The murmur rippled instantly. Isolde's gaze locked onto her, satisfaction flickering beneath composure. "Duchess Bradford," Isolde said warmly when Seraphina took her place. "How gracious of you to attend. We were just addressing concerns raised by several houses." "Concerns?" Seraphina echoed lightly. "About standards," Isolde continued. "Specifically, the recent relaxation of them." A few soft laughs followed. Isolde gestured expansively. "Titles carry weight. Responsibility. Bloodlines ensure continuity. When exceptions are made, it raises questions about merit." Seraphina waited. Silence was a blade when used correctly. "And so," Isolde concluded, "we felt it appropriate to ask, what qualifies you truly to stand where generations of noble women have stood?" The room stilled. Every eye fixed on Seraphina. Isolde's trap was elegant. Force Seraphina to defend herself, make her sound grasping, emotional, unworthy. Seraphina stepped forward. "I was not invited to inherit tradition," she said calmly. "I was invited to contribute." Isolde tilted her head. "Contribution is admirable, but this forum concerns leadership." "And leadership," Seraphina replied, "requires competence." A murmur stirred. "For 3 years," Seraphina continued, "I negotiated trade agreements now credited to House Crowell. I resolved disputes that kept border provinces solvent. I drafted policies still in effect today. Isolde smiled thinly. Claims are easy to make, which is why I brought evidence, Seraphina said. The ripple became a wave. She turned slightly. Cale stepped forward from the shadows, documents already in hand. He placed them on the central table, without ceremony. Original drafts, correspondence, signatures. Isolde's smile faltered. These documents, Seraphina said evenly, were verified by royal clerks this morning. Anyone may review them. Whispers erupted. Shock sharpened into interest. Isolde recovered quickly. Even if true, you were acting under House Crowell. Correct, Seraphina said, and they profited accordingly. But let's not pretend effort loses value because credit was stolen. A pause. Then she added softly, or because the person who did the work lacked the right surname. The room shifted. Not sympathy, respect. Isolde's voice hardened. You're exploiting paperwork to embarrass. No, Seraphina interrupted gently. I'm correcting the record. Silence fell. Isolde stood very still, realizing too late that the trap had snapped shut around her instead. Seraphina inclined her head. If the question is whether I belong here, then perhaps the better question is this. How many of you have benefited from work you never acknowledged? No one answered. When Seraphina turned to leave, the gallery did not laugh. It watched, and Isolde ravens higher, gleaming heiress of everything Seraphina had been denied, understood one thing with terrifying clarity. She had not exposed a fraud. She had revealed a rival. The palace burned with light. Carriages lined the drive in perfect order, silk and velvet spilling onto marble steps as nobles arrived dressed for spectacle. Music drifted through open doors, polished and precise, masking the tension coiled beneath every smile. Seraphina descended from the carriage beside Cale, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The murmurs began instantly. Not curiosity this time, anticipation. Tonight was not a test. It was a reckoning. They entered together, announced without flourish. The room reacted anyway. Conversations fractured. Eyes followed. Somewhere near the center, Seraphina saw Lucian and his soul frozen mid-conversation, champagne forgotten in their hands. Good. The king arrived moments later, young and composed, his presence cutting cleanly through the noise. When he took his place, the hall stilled. This was no ordinary gathering. Everyone felt it. My lords and ladies, the king began, voice carrying effortlessly. This evening marks the conclusion of several ongoing inquiries. A collective breath held. Seraphina felt Cale shift beside her, not tense, but ready. The crown exists to serve the realm, the king continued. When power is abused, when credit is stolen, when corruption hides behind tradition, it becomes my duty to act. A ripple of unease spread. Duke Morrigan, the king said, bring forward the findings. Cale stepped into the open, his presence commanding without volume. He laid documents upon the dais. One by one, names followed. Houses, patterns of fraud, embezzlement, manipulation. When House Crowell was spoken, Lucian went pale. And now, the king said, turning, we address authorship. Silence fell like a blade. Several treaties and accords credited to House Crowell were, in fact, authored by Duchess Seraphina Bradford. Every eye snapped to her. Seraphina stepped forward, heart steady, spine straight. She did not look at Lucian. She did not need to. The originals bear her hand, the king continued. Verified. Confirmed. Isolde's composure shattered. This is outrageous, she snapped. She's exploiting. Enough, the king said sharply. Guards moved, not toward Seraphina. Lady Ravens higher, the king said coolly. Brown Holdings' finances were also reviewed. The results were enlightening. Isolde's breath caught. The room erupted, not in sound, but in shock. Reputations collapsed in real time. Alliances recalculated instantly. There would be no undoing this. Lucian staggered forward. Your Majesty, you chose wealth over integrity, the king said. That choice ends tonight. He turned back to Cale. For years, you have served without recognition. controlled chaos without crown. Cale knelt. "I name you Grand Duke," the king declared, "with authority over noble affairs." The hall gasped. "And you," the king said, eyes settling on Seraphina, "you have stood in shadow long enough." He extended his hand. Seraphina ascended the steps, the weight of the moment pressing, but not breaking her. "I appoint you sovereign duchess," the king said. "Equal authority, equal voice." The chains settled cold and heavy around her neck. Below, Lucian understood too late. Seraphina looked out over the court that had once erased her. This time it bowed. There would be no return to before, only forward. Dawn came quietly after the longest night of Seraphina's life. The palace was still when she stood on the eastern balcony, the city unfolding below in soft gray light. Bells rang in the distance, measured, formal. Announcements traveling faster than sunlight. By noon, every house would know. By nightfall, nothing would be the same. Behind her, footsteps approached. Cale joined her without ceremony. No regalia now, no chains. Just a man who had finally stepped into the open. He rested his forearms on the stone beside hers. "You didn't hesitate," he said. "I already lived the cost of hesitation," Seraphina replied. Below, carriages moved with new urgency. Messengers came and went. The machinery of power was adjusting, slowly, reluctantly, but it was moving. The court convened before midday. This time, Seraphina did not stand alone. They rose when she entered, not all of them willingly. Some with resentment burning behind polite masks, others with something like relief. The ones who had survived by adapting rather than exploiting understood what this moment meant. She took her seat beside Cale, equal in height, equal in authority. "The investigations will continue," Seraphina said calmly, her voice carrying without effort. "But reform is not punishment. It is correction." Murmurs followed. She let them. "Houses that cooperate will retain dignity. Those that resist will lose protection." A calculated silence. From the back of the chamber, Lucian was escorted forward, no longer defiant, only diminished. Isolde was absent. Her empire was already being dismantled. Lucian did not meet Seraphina's eyes. "You once told me I was resilient," Seraphina said evenly. "You were right. You mistook that for permission to use me." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Your sentence will be service," she continued, "not exile. You will rebuild what you hollowed out." Slowly. Lucian nodded, broken. When he was taken away, the chamber exhaled. Afterward, the nobles filtered out, some hurried, some thoughtful, some afraid. Seraphina remained seated, absorbing the stillness that followed authority exercised without cruelty. "You changed the equation," Cale said quietly. "No," Seraphina replied. "I revealed it." As the hall emptied, she stood and crossed to the window. The city looked different from here, not smaller, but clearer. She had not risen by chance. She had risen because the system could no longer deny her weight. Seraphina Vale, once erased, once traded, had become something the court would never again reduce. Not a symbol, not a cautionary tale, a force. Beside her, Cale reached for her hand, not in triumph, in recognition. "The work begins now," he said. Seraphina nodded, eyes steady. "Good." Below them, the kingdom adjusted its spine, resisting, bending, realigning. For the first time, it was not bending around bloodlines or gold. It was bending around truth. And Seraphina, the woman who was never disposable, stood at its center, unmoved, undeniable, and finally seen.